This obese widow bought a ranch for $1, but something dangerous was living inside. Martha. Ellis signed her name with fingers that trembled from more than cold. The clerk smirked as he slid the deed across the counter. "Don't say I didn't warn you, Mrs. Ellis. No one keeps that place. Not the Crenshaws, not the men who tried after. You'll be back in town before the leaves fall." Behind her, the loafers and loafers' wives whispered. She heard the words she always heard. Obese widow, cursed bride. Obese Martha. She ignored them and walked into the sunlight, clutching the single sheet of paper that meant 30 acres of her own. The price had been $1. That was all she had left after being cast out of her husband's kin. She was 27, newly wed, newly widowed. Thomas had died coughing blood one bleak winter night, and his family blamed her. They said she smothered him with her bulk, that she schemed for inheritance. They drove her from the house with nothing but the dress on her back. The Crenshaw Ranch was all that remained. A patch of land nobody wanted. Rumors hung over it like vultures, whispers of strange noises, bad luck, hauntings. Martha didn't care. Dirt under her boots and walls around her body meant life. She'd already seen hell. The house leaned sideways, clapboards gray and warped. The roof sagged. Wind whistled through cracks where nails had rusted loose. Martha built a fire in the hearth, cooked beans in a pan, and sat alone at the table. The silence pressed on her ears. That's when she felt it, a presence. It was like someone breathed just behind her. The tiny hairs at her nape stood on end. Her skin prickled as if eyes studied her back. She spun, lamp raised. Only shadows stared back. Her voice cracked in the hollow room. "Thomas, if that's you, let me be. Please." But the air stayed thick, alive, watching. Days bled into weeks. Martha hauled water, mended fences, swept dust. Her body ached from work she was never meant to shoulder alone. Nights, she lay awake with grief heavier than her own weight, and the strangeness began. The broken radio on the shelf, silent since before her purchase, hummed with faint static one morning, then coughed music. A window she had nailed shut against the draft stood unsealed. Glass neatly mended. Tools she'd left scattered were stacked in the shed. Martha froze at each discovery, heart racing. Was it her dead husband's ghost? Was she losing her mind? But part of her, the part starving for kindness, warmed. She whispered into the emptiness, "Thank you." At night she wept into her pillow, whispering Thomas's name. She had been a virgin bride, still waiting for the tender night's marriage promised. Death had stolen that chance before it bloomed. Now she was left untouched, unloved, mocked for her size. Her body was soft, full where others were trim. She believed no man would ever touch her with gentleness, but each small repair, each unseen act, the latch fixed on the barn door, the wood chopped before she could fetch it, chipped at despair. She began to wonder if maybe, somehow, love lingered. Above her in the attic rafters, Samuel Cole listened to her prayers. He had been living in the house months before she arrived. A fugitive from lawmen who hunted him for a crime he hadn't committed, framed for a bloody bank robbery in San Marcos. Samuel had fled wounded and hidden in the abandoned Crenshaw place. Everyone feared the land. Perfect cover. Then Martha had come, wide-eyed, wide-hipped, cheeks round as peaches, broken by grief, mocked by kin. At first he cursed her. Her presence endangered him. But as he watched, as he listened, his heart twisted. He began to help, fixing what she could not, mending in secret. And slowly, dangerously, he began to want her. One evening she carried water for the tin tub. She stripped, pale arms glowing in lamplight, and slid into steaming water with a sigh. Samuel should have turned away, but months of hiding, years without a woman's warmth, glued him to the crack in the wall. That night Martha woke, certain something stood at her bedside. She whispered into the dark, "If you're Thomas, please, rest." "Don't haunt me!" Samuel crouched above, biting his lip until it bled. By spring, Martha could no longer bear it. She rode into town and returned with a Comanche shaman, an old man painted and serious. He walked her rooms, chanted, burned sage. Samuel watched, hidden behind a false wall. Mischief pricked him. Perhaps if he frightened them enough, they'd stop. He shoved a chair. He rattled chains. He whispered like the wind. The shaman paled, eyes wide. "This spirit does not want to leave." He fled. leaving Martha kneeling on the floorboards, sobbing. "Please," she cried. "If you're Thomas, let me live. I loved you. Don't torment me." Samuel's heart cracked. He wanted to go to her, to tell her the truth, but fear bound him silent. The shaman never came back. Word spread fast through town that the Ellis widow's ranch was cursed beyond medicine. When Martha rode in for supplies, clerks watched her as though she carried plague. She stopped correcting them. Better to be thought cursed than pitied. At night, the house seemed louder. Floorboards creaked above when no one walked. The wind moaned in the flue, even on still evenings. She tried praying harder, whispering the rosary until her lips numbed, but the unseen hand still worked. Windows tightened against the draft. Hinges oiled themselves. Once, when she overslept in grief, her morning chores were already half done. Martha trembled at the thought of Thomas's ghost still laboring for her. Yet in her belly stirred something gentler than fear, a sense she was not altogether abandoned. Samuel Cole pressed his back against rough beams in the attic, jaw tight as stone. He hadn't meant to torment her. He only wanted to exist unseen until the law forgot him. Yet the way she cried out to the ghost of her husband carved lines in his chest. He had lived through outlaw camps, prison cells, dust storms that blinded men. None of it clawed at him like the sound of her weeping alone. Her softness had become his hunger. Not just the flesh, though he dreamed of it nightly, but the warmth. The way she spoke to shadows as though they might answer. Every kindness he gave in secret only tethered him tighter. Spring thaw brought labor Martha could hardly shoulder. She dragged brush to burn, her arms shaking under bundles twice too heavy. She tried to mend a section of fence, only to snap the hammer handle in frustration. At dusk, defeated, she slumped in the yard and let tears streak the dirt on her cheeks. When she rose at dawn, the brush pile was gone, ashes cooling in the pit. The fence stood straight and strong. A new hammer leaned against the post. She pressed her palm to the wood, whispering, "If you're here, thank you." For the first time since Thomas's burial, her lips curved in a faint smile. One night, lantern in hand, she stepped into the barn. Something shifted in the loft, a scrape of boot leather, too heavy for rats. She froze, heart thundering. "Thomas?" Silence. Only her own breath misting in the chill. She backed out, bolting the door, and sat trembling in her kitchen. The fire popped. The radio hissed faintly, as though trying to speak. She whispered into her hands, "If you mean me harm, do it quick. If not, please, let me live." Above, in the rafters, Samuel buried his face in his hands. He could not reveal himself yet. She would scream, call the sheriff, and he'd hang before he proved his innocence. But every night it grew harder. By summer, townsfolk muttered openly, "Widow won't last the year. She talks to ghosts." Obese Martha should have stayed with kin instead of haunting that ranch. She endured their sneers with head high, but each ride home left her raw. The ranch became both prison and refuge, alone with whispers, yet safe from human cruelty. Safe, except for the sense she was not alone at all. That night, he crept down. He set a loaf of bread on her table, stolen from town with risk of his life. He lingered, watching her chest rise and fall in sleep. She looked younger then, lips soft, hair loose on the pillow. A warmth surged in him, dangerous and undeniable. His hand lifted, almost brushing her cheek. He yanked it back, trembling. If he touched her, he would never stop. Instead, he retreated into shadow, every step a knife. The next evening, Martha lit a single candle and stood in the kitchen. Her voice shook, but she forced it steady. "If you are my Thomas, hear me. I can't live like this, half haunted, half alive. If you care for me, show yourself. If you don't, go. Leave me to my misery." Samuel stood hidden in the attic, fists clenched until his knuckles ached. He nearly stepped into the light. Nearly, but the memory of gallows and chains dragged him back. A week later, slipping to the creek at night for water, Samuel froze at voices. 3 men crouched by the willows, low-voiced and mean. "Widow up there's ripe for picking? She's soft, alone, won't fight back. We'll pay her a visit soon." Easy prey. Samuel's blood turned to fire. He knew the leader's drawl, Clay McKinnon, the very devil who framed him in San Marcos. They laughed, planning how they'd take Martha like cattle to slaughter. Samuel gritted his teeth until they nearly cracked. For the first time in months, the choice was clear. He could not hide while she faced wolves. He began to plan. Samuel returned to the attic that night, pacing like a caged wolf. Clay McKinnon, the man who had damned him to life as a fugitive, was coming for Martha. Samuel's jaw worked, fists clenching until the nails bit. He could not allow it. Not to her. But how to fight 3 men alone without revealing himself? He raked a hand down his face. Staying hidden had kept him alive. Stepping into light might mean the noose. Yet for the first time, he wanted life not only for himself, he wanted it for her. Martha felt it before she knew it. On her way back from town, a pair of men whistled low as she passed. When she turned, their eyes lingered too long, too bold. Her heart knocked painfully in her chest. That night, alone in bed, she prayed harder than ever. "Thomas, if you guard me still, don't let harm come." The house groaned. Shadows shifted. She pulled the quilt to her chin. Somewhere above, Samuel listened, aching to tell her the truth, aching to promise he would not let wolves through her door. The next day, Samuel slipped into the barn when she rode to fetch flour. He worked quick, sweat stinging his eyes. He dug a pit behind the barn, camouflaging it with brush. He rigged wire and bell by the fence, so their approach would sing. By dusk, his hands blistered and raw, he crouched in the rafters again, chest hammering. He had set the snare. Now he prayed it would be enough. Martha found the bell on the fence that evening, puzzled. She hadn't placed it. She tested it. The wire jingled faintly. Her stomach knotted. Was her ghost protecting her? Or warning her? She whispered into the wind, "If you mean to help me, please show me. I'm so tired of being afraid." Tears streaked her cheeks. She fell asleep with the lantern burning, heart heavy. Above, Samuel watched her breathing steady, his own heart aching. 3 nights later they came. Samuel heard them first, their boots crunching the gravel, low laughs floating through the dark. He crouched, waiting. Martha stirred in her bed, uneasy before the knock ever came. She sat up, clutching the quilt. "Evening, widow," a voice drawled through the door. "Clay McKinnon. Heard you could use company." Her blood iced. She didn't move, didn't breathe. The knob rattled. A boot kicked the door. Samuel's pulse hammered. He yanked the costume he had rigged, a cloak of tattered hides, a mask of bone and soot. He loosed a roar that rattled the rafters. The men cursed, spinning. A lantern burst into sudden flame where Samuel had rigged oil. Shadows writhed on the walls like demons. "Hellfire!" One man screamed. They bolted, straight toward the barn, where the ground gave way beneath them. Clay and his gang tumbled into the pit, thrashing, shouting curses. Martha clutched her quilt, heart near stopping. The house shook with noise, growls, crashes, men screaming. She thought the spirits had gone mad, dragging sinners to hell. Then the noise stilled. Only ragged breathing lingered outside. Slowly she crept to the door, lantern trembling in her hand. Samuel stood before the pit, chest heaving. The costume hung loose from him, mask cracked. In the lantern glow, Martha saw his face for the first time. A man, not a ghost. Not Thomas. Tall, broad, jaw shadowed with stubble, eyes burning blue in the firelight. Her breath caught. Who are you?" He swallowed hard, voice rough from months of silence. "My name's Samuel Cole. I've been hiding here. Hiding from the law. Not 'cause I'm guilty. 'Cause they framed me. And I swear before God, I couldn't leave you to those men." Martha staggered back, the truth crashing over her like a storm. Clay spat dirt from his teeth, glaring up. "You'll hang, Cole, you and your obese whore." Martha flinched. Samuel's jaw clenched, but he did not strike. Instead, he turned to her, eyes desperate. "I'll fetch the sheriff. I'll bring him here, and you'll see the truth when these men tell it under iron bars." He hesitated, chest rising and falling. "But if you want me gone after, I'll go." She stared at him, the man who had haunted her days and guarded her nights. Her voice trembled. "Just go. Do what you must." Samuel nodded once, fierce and sure. Then he strode into the dark, leaving the villains cursing in the pit. Martha stood in the yard, lantern clutched tight, staring down at the men thrashing in the pit. Their curses filled the night, foul and ugly. Clay McKinnon leered up at her. "You think you're safe 'cause some stray dog's watching over you? That dog's a dead man. And you're just meat," Martha recoiled, bile rising in her throat. Her knees trembled, but she stayed rooted. For the first time in months, she was not entirely alone. Behind the words of hate, she heard something else, Samuel's voice echoing in her ears. "I couldn't leave you to those men." Samuel saddled a horse from the barn and rode like the devil was on his heels. The night air slashed his face, and the hooves beat like war drums. Every mile toward town risked discovery. If the sheriff recognized him before Clay was in irons, it could be the end, but he had no choice. For the first time since San Marcos, he didn't care what Obese held for him. He only cared about the woman trembling by the lantern light, waiting for help. Hours dragged like years. Martha sat in a chair by the pit, lantern set on the ground. The men jeered at her, spat up filth, promised horrors once free. She clutched the Bible in her lap and read aloud, her voice shaking. Not for them, but for herself. The night stretched on. Her heart caught between terror and a strange, budding trust in the stranger who had revealed himself. The eastern sky was paling when Samuel returned, and he was not alone. Sheriff Tully rode beside him, mustache bristling, eyes sharp. 3 deputies followed. The lawmen peered into the pit, grim-faced at the sight of Clay and his pack. "Well, I'll be damned," Tully muttered. "Clay McKinnon, been hunting you for a year, and you bring yourself gift-wrapped," Clay spat. "It's Cole you want." "He's the killer!" "Shut your mouth," Tully barked. "We got witnesses enough saying otherwise." "Looks like the widow here's testimony seals it," Martha blinked. "Me?" The sheriff tipped his hat. "You saw who came at you. You saw who defended you. Sometimes the law's as simple as that." As the deputies bound Clay and his men, Samuel stood apart, waiting. He looked every inch the fugitive, broad, weathered, eyes storm bright. But he didn't flinch. When the last rope was tied, Tully turned to him. "Cole, the truth is you were wanted, but tonight you saved a woman's life. And these 3 just confessed more than they knew. I'll see your case gets heard proper." Samuel's chest loosened for the first time in years. He nodded once, but his gaze went to Martha. She stood pale, trembling, torn between relief and fear. The man she had thought a ghost was flesh and blood, flesh that had watched her, helped her, saved her, and wanted her. When the sheriff and his men rode away with their prisoners, the ranch was quiet once more. Martha turned to Samuel, lantern between them. Her voice came low. "You've been here all along." He nodded. "Since before you came." "I hid because I had to." "But I swear, Martha, I never meant you harm." Her lip trembled. "You spied on me." He bowed his head. "I did, and I'm sorry, but I couldn't walk away. You were light in a place I thought was dark forever." The silence between them throbbed. Then she whispered almost to herself, "You're no ghost." He shook his head, a smile ghosting his lips. "No, ma'am. Just a man too foolish to let go." For 2 days, Samuel stayed in town under the sheriff's watch. Martha heard whispers when she came for flour. Coal cleared. McKinnon confessed. Widow saved. It seemed half the town didn't know whether to spit or tip their hats when she passed. On the 3rd evening, she found him waiting by the well, hat in his hands. He looked cleaner somehow, though still rugged, still carved by dust and fire. "They cleared me," he said simply. "Clay bragged too much. Sheriff believes I was framed. I'm a free man now," her breath caught. For months she had felt him only in whispers and shadows. Now he stood in open light, and freedom meant he could ride anywhere. "Will you go?" she asked, voice small. He studied her, storm in his eyes. "Not if you'd have me stay." Back at the ranch, the night was quiet, only crickets sawing. Martha stood in the kitchen, lantern between them. Her heart hammered. Words pressed at her lips until they broke loose. "I thought you were Thomas. I thought his ghost was fixing things, keeping me company. And I prayed for him to leave me be. I didn't know it was you." Samuel's jaw tightened. "I didn't mean to shame you. I just couldn't let you sink. You were stronger than me, braver. I hid, but you kept living. Every time you thanked the dark, it cut me deep. 'Cause it weren't him. It was me!" Martha's throat burned. She saw him not as a phantom, nor a criminal, but as a man who had watched her with aching need, who had saved her when no one else cared. Her hand trembled as it lifted. She touched his arm, rough muscle under worn cloth. "You're no ghost," she whispered again. He caught her hand, pressed it to his chest. His heart thudded strong beneath. Still, the fear lingered. She pulled back, folding arms over her soft body. "I'm not what men want, Samuel. My husband's family hated me for it. The town mocks me." "You don't have to stop!" His voice cracked like a whip. He stepped closer, fierce. "I've been in shadows long enough to know what I want. And it's not their whispers, their thin smiles. It's you, flesh and spirit. Don't you ever say you ain't wanted? Tears blurred her sight. No man had spoken for her like that. No man had seen her and chosen her. Days turned into weeks. Samuel worked the ranch in open daylight now, hammer in hand, sweat darkening his shirt. Martha cooked, cleaned, laughed more than she had in years. At night, they sat by the fire. At first apart, then nearer. His hand brushed hers. Her head found his shoulder. The love was slow, awkward, tender, like two souls learning to breathe again. Martha still wept sometimes for Thomas, for what had been stolen. But Samuel held her through it, never asking her to forget, only to let him be the man who stayed. One evening, she stood in the yard as the sun bled red over the hills. She looked at the sagging house, the barn patched new, the land she had bought for $1. It had nearly broken her. It had given her terror and despair. But it had also given her the man now striding toward her, shirt open at the throat, eyes soft despite the storm in them. She whispered into the wind, half to Thomas, half to herself. Rest easy now. I'm not alone. Samuel stopped before her, searching her eyes. I'll ask plain, Martha. Do you want me here, truly? She held his gaze, cheeks wet with tears that weren't sorrow anymore. Yes, she said simply. Stay. He bent his head, lips brushing hers, gentle, reverent, as though afraid she might vanish. She clung to him, the ghost of loneliness finally lifting.